Hello, this is Branko Malic of Kali Tribune. This podcast will be devoted to a rather broad question, namely the question of what is intelligence. Of course, we cannot be expected to lay out some kind of overarching and um, exhaustive theory that will provide the definite answer to this question. But we'll just probe this problem, which is, of course, extremely deep problem from the angle of everyday life. As all philosophical, metaphysical, and in effect essential problems have their root in what we call everyday life. That is, we meet them there, and their loftiness is something that we can best perceive and reach only if we start from what we already have at hand. There was a question posed on Kali Tribune just recently that some dovetails quite good into this problematics, but from the opposite direction, namely the question about what it means to be stupid. More concretely, somebody posed the question whether people who are capable of devising very intelligent political or philosophical theories can indeed at the same time be stupid. And two names were put forward. One was Alexander Dugan and the other Zbigniew Brzezinski. And this is pretty appropriate comparison because it gives us, namely pointing out those two people, because they represent two forms of intelligence, I would say, and two forms of stupidity. They can give us some insight into this broad theme of what is intelligence, so we can give some preliminary answers. Namely, it is obvious that, and this is a fact of everyday existence, that intelligence is not a unified thing. The intelligence is said in various ways. In these two people, for instance, intelligence as well as stupidity is said indeed in various ways. We'll start with Brzezinski. Zbigniew Brzezinski was first and foremost a practical politician, I would say, rather than politologist. So, and his intelligence in the sense of practical politics, that is, I think, better to say a military foreign politics, was immense. He was, I think, as much as I know about him and what he did, throughout his career, he was a very capable man. But he was also a philosopher in a sense which is very postmodern, in fact. To clarify, the Brzezinski's philosophy, about which we had some material on Kali Tribune, that is not about his geopolitics and such things that in these conspiracists and Altimedia and anti-imperialists like to pounce on, but strictly his philosophy, and that's contained in the book Between Two Ages, America in Tectonic era, and you'll find a link to the now rather dated, but I think still rather good article in the show notes. Namely, in this book, Brzezinski himself lays out a definite theory of knowledge, and I would say, by consequence, intelligence. And this was precisely the subject of the critique on Kali Tribune. Namely, Brzezinski's idea is that human history is a process of evolution of different types of societies in a definite through definite epoch, 3 or 4 epochs, that ends up in this technotronic era we live in now, although he wrote his book at the beginning of 70s. And one very important feature of this technotronic era is that knowledge will more and more become external. This is what he says. This is very interesting. What this means that knowledge, and by consequence intelligence, will become something external. Well, it will be something that everybody will try to create and test. That is, when one early sign of this was IQ testing, because IQ test is kind of like testing of externalized intelligence. Intelligence that can be in some way detached from what men or women really are. The IQ presupposes that there is some kind of physiological basis, not only basis that, but that intelligence is a flatly physiological thing that is born from interaction of inborn properties of human body and interaction with its environment. Now Brzezinski thought that this will move, and we will return to IQ and IQ tests in a minute. Testing is an attempt, standardized testing is an attempt to watch, to observe your intelligence from the outside, in a way. In a very specific way, that is detaching it from the real life situations and putting it into a kind of experimental environment of testing, where results are expressed in graphs, in statistics, and so on and so forth. And Brzezinski believed that in technotronic era, this kind of intelligence this kind of knowledge will be more and more prevalent. That is, the knowledge will be externalized. The best way to imagine what it means is to recall that pop science fiction movie Matrix that is so popular as a source of memes on the internet. And in Matrix you have this depiction of people plugging in or jacking in the computer and downloading skills, martial arts and so on and so forth. Whoever saw the movie, and I believe it is very hard not to pass it by, knows what I'm talking about here. Now this attempt to infuse knowledge in oneself from the outside by technological act is what it means by externalizing knowledge. And this you can see, a Matrix is a science fiction, that is, it depicts the ideal type of this kind of knowledge in its most developed form, that is not still and probably never will be accomplished. But some of manifestations of this technotronic knowledge are, for instance, those language skills, what they call, or communication skills, as the things like talking to people and discernment, and even the body language is something that is to be trained in technical way. And technical activity is a such activity whose aim or whose intention or whose purpose is always outside of the activity. It means to produce something. Whereas, for instance, practical activity as well as mental activity, thinking is different. The purpose of thinking is thinking itself. The purpose of acting in a moral sense is the act itself. So you can, if you act morally, for instance, if you're doing good, you can be really more or less good. Either you're good or either you're not good. Whereas when you making something, for instance, digging a ditch, you can dig ditch that is deep enough, you can dig ditch that is too shallow, and so forth, because the value of your activity is ascertained by its result, that is furthermore detached from the activity. It doesn't revert into it. It has in a way the being of its own. An idea that such intimate things as ability to communicate with other people, to talk with other people, becomes skill, means when humor becomes skill that has to be systematized and taught systematically to people, this means to externalize what cannot in fact be externalized. You can have an illusion that you're succeeding, but in a process you are turning this knowledge into something different, into something that is not spontaneous anymore, not intimate. By intimate I mean immediate, something that is undetachable from what you are, into something that is detached and that can be observed, that can be dismantled, that can be reassembled, perfected, and so on and so forth. This is what externalization means. Now, in my opinion, this is incredibly stupid from somebody like Brzezinski, because he's not giving you a proper understanding of knowledge. But by calling Brzezinski stupid in this sense, we can call stupid approximately 90%, for instance, of job advertisement in the modern big cities, for instance, where those are, as everybody knows, those communication skills, team playership, then team buildings and such things. Those are normal, those are obligatory things now, which from the standpoint of intelligence, in another sense, are complete lunacy, are complete illusions. Never mind that they work in some sense. This changes nothing. They are in discrepancy, indeed contradiction, to what knowledge and intelligence in fact is. But before we try to pose what intelligence, outline what intelligence is, let us turn to Dugan. Dugan is a man who speaks 9 languages, allegedly, but I do believe him. I heard him speak at least 4, and from those 4 I know 2, and he speaks them rather well. And he was able to, for instance, to give a lecture in German with no notes and obviously with no preparation, because believe me, if you ever held a lectures as a part of your job, you learn to recognize very quickly this when somebody is talking spontaneously, when he is not preparing, having any kind of pre-prepared outline of his speech. And he does this in foreign language to which he is not, I think, entirely accustomed, but he knows it very well. And this is quite a feat. And intelligence, there was a time where speaking many languages was considered a sign of high intelligence. And this is something I do think also. And this intelligence also does not have much to do with IQ. In my opinion, there are tests for this type of intelligence, but they are not that good. And they are not that difficult, because in this kind of intelligence, it's more about ability to hear well and to have this sense of nuances of ideas and so on and so forth. And Dugin is a guy who really has this ability, and is a guy who turned himself into philosopher without having philosophical books at all in the 80s in Russia. He is no small potatoes. But Dugin is, as opposed to Zbigniew Brzezinski, not as opposed, I sincerely apologize, together with Zbigniew Brzezinski, metaphysically stupid. Because Dugin is a man who takes any kind of traditional doctrine, be it metaphysics, be it theory of art, be it politics, be it religion, and completely corrupts it, completely inverts everything in it to point it towards chaos, from which he acts, which is his appropriated origin. There was an article on Kali Tribune, Suicide Bombers of Modernity, where there was a passage taken from Dugin, where Dugin narrates this experience he had as a young man, experience of hell, in fact. And judging by that experience, everybody who knows a thing or two about this knows that Dugin is a man who passed through fire. This is the best expression to somehow relate what this experience means. This experience of complete devoidness of anything good, true, beautiful in the world. Complete absence of God. And problem with him, it's not stupid to walk through fire, because this experience this is not something you choose. This hits you by the choice that is not yours, and you can't do anything about it. The stupidity of Dugin is because he fell in love with fire, and this is completely obvious, and he wants to burn in it. This is extremely stupid. And from this comes his metaphysical stupidity. We'll put aside the fact that Dugin is a fantast, that he is a guy who speaks before he thinks, sometimes because he's crazy. He's unhinged, chaotic in his essence, but he doesn't appear so at first sight. He appears complete opposite, but his very essence is chaos, and his ability to deal with the ideas, to change ideas, to go effortlessly through ideas is precisely because he has no substance. He has corruption in his center, and this is, to have corruption in one's center is rather stupid thing to do. So we have two forms of stupidity. They are similar but not exactly identical. There are other things. There is being clumsy, and this is, believe it or not, what in my opinion IQ tests deal with. Because IQ tests deal with instincts, I would say, not intelligence. They deal with reactions in a laboratory environment, as I already said in the context of Zbigniew Brzezinski. This is not intelligence. This is ability to react. And this is more like physiology, because this is a IQ idea of intelligence quotient, that is the quantity, material quantity of intelligence. And intelligence was always, almost always, considered to be immaterial thing. This materialization of intelligence is in fact just an evolutionary idea of intelligence being a highly evolved survival instinct. This intelligence we will not accept as intelligence. So what we could say that intelligence is, and can it be defined? I don't think it can be defined in a sense that definition will exhaust everything that is contained in that thing intelligence. Let's use one definition. Definition of the intent of intelligence, of what intelligence intends to. Intelligence is activity intending the truth. And the truth is, I'll use one of these old medieval definition. The truth is undividedness of being and what is and being. The truth is the undividedness of being and what is. Now, this definition is in fact the definition of what in medieval philosophy was called transcendental. Transcendental are convertible principles that that constitute kind of differences in this ultimate reality of God, differences that are in fact not differences that produce identity. So, for instance, to give you an example, when you say transcendentals are being, one, good and beautiful, being and good are convertible, because being means to be good and good means to be. But good gives this conceptual extension. When you think being good gives you opportunity to go further. It makes it infinitely more abundant than it already is, in a way, for your mind, not for itself, because in itself it is abundant enough. This is the theme in itself, as you can probably already deduce. We will not go deep into this, but definition of truth is good, because you have this derivative definition from this, that truth is adequatio intellectus rei. This adequation of intellect and the thing, where your intellect is able to be assimilated to thing. There is this notion, some people have notion of this, meaning that the truth is the correspondence of representation you have in your imagination or concept to things. This is not essentially it. It is derived from something deeper, and the deeper thing is this connectedness or undividedness of what is with being. This means that reality is immersed in eternal, let's say, in eternity of being, eternity of truth, eternity of goodness, and so on and so forth, eternity of beauty also. When we understand things, individual beings, our understanding is adequate insofar as we penetrate or pervade, let's say, reach the being of the thing. Now, the thing and its being are not really the same. This may seem like some kind of conceptual nitpicking, but in fact it is not. The being is what makes those things real. while not being any of them. And this is what the intellect or mind, or even we can use translation spirit sometimes for this with some reservations, is what intends into this. This is its object, the truth. Needless to say, the truth is also being and good and what was that? One is convertible with the word God. The purpose of intelligence is to know the truth. And this truth comes from discernment. That is to say, from appropriating and focusing on what things really are, what events really mean, but not in the sense that you exhaust them to their end, because we are not able to do that. We don't have this angelic or even godlike knowledge. But to discern what is really substantial in them, what is true in them, what is one in them, what is good in them, what is beautiful in them. If you are not able to do this, then from the standpoint of this definition of intelligence, you are stupid. And one man who is stupid in this sense, for instance, is Dugan. And I would say Brzezinskis too, but Dugan even more so. The reason being that he cannot see any good truth and beauty in the world, in what he calls present world. And so he wants it to be destroyed. So the new world, excuse me, could emerge in polygenesis, in a new birth. And he's very explicit about it. Nowadays less so, but his earlier writings are unambiguous about this. And for somebody who, well, let's say that this is something that some people already have seen in others, so it's very, very easy to recognize what kind of guy he is without writing. Dugan is not unique by any stretch of the imagination, but he's famous. Inability to discern the good in things means stupidity, because it is inability to intend your intelligence towards its proper object to a proper extent. This means being deluded, because it is impossible that there is no good in things. It is impossible that there is not one in things, in this unity, that there is no unity. It is impossible that things are ultimately detached from their being, that is, that they are untrue. So it is impossible that there is no truth in beings. And finally, it is impossible that there is no being of beings. Now, to make this less abstract, in conclusion, let's see what this means, for instance, in politics. A lot of people who follow internet-mediated media, especially if they have this moniker out, can notice. One thing you'll notice is terminal lack of discernment. You have people who fall in the dialectics of black versus white. They take, for instance, this monolithic West led by America, which is absolute evil, and then take some poor country as North Korea led by sun god and consider it good, because they must, because they define the US and West as absolute evil, therefore this must be good. This is something that happens unconsciously. These are what Kant called secret inferences of pure mind. Those are hidden decisions we make, Because mind you, this notion of intelligence just proposed implies that intelligence is connected to free will. Namely, we are speaking about intention. You have to intend it. You have to focus it. You have to do your thing. It will not be done for you. It is not intelligence of reaction. It is not problem solving. This is what in fact is called contemplation. The original Greek word was theoria. That's how we got the word theory. This is it. And the people who do this in alt media, for instance, where they fail, is in discernment, is in the fundamental, elementary discernment of the principles of thought and intelligence, namely that there is no such thing as absolute evil in this world. Therefore, there is no such thing as absolute good in this world. These are metaphysical terms. These are terms of supernatural, or in the case of evil, of absolute corruption. That is more proper way to define something as absolute evil. These are not they are supernatural or infranatural. They are not natural, they are not historical. They manifest in history, they make their presence known, but they are not of it. And people who do this go down the drain. They are extremely stupid, they are deluded, and what can be seen if this ecosystem of alt media is observed, and Kali Tribune does observe it, and there will be a much more substantial work about it in the future. You see that this kind of stupidity, this neglecting of the principles of intelligence, no matter how people who do this are intelligent in other senses of the word intelligence, leads to mental breakdowns that are pretty novel type of mental breakdowns. And this is very, and they are creating very dangerous political climate through this internet media, because they have great following, and all of this because they are stupid, because they are not able to know the truth. They don't know principles, how intelligence is to act to know the truth, and they don't know principles because they don't want to know them. They want to create them. But that's another story. In conclusion, we can say that intelligence, stupidity, and such things are said in manifold ways, as to paraphrase Aristotle. Aristotle liked to say, ton legetai polachos, meaning the being is said in various ways, in various manners. So in one sense, being means matter, in one sense, being means form, in one sense, being means God, in one sense, being means piece of crap. But they are always spoken on the ground of one instance, on the one cause. And this is the same goes with intelligence, analogous. Intelligence, let's posit that for the sake of this short, not so short, but short in respect of the difficulty of the subject, this podcast, that intelligence is activity directed to knowing the truth. That all other forms of intelligence are called intelligence in some way in a relation to it, but they are directed to something else, because intelligence of the animal, that is instinct, is also a kind of intelligence. And this intelligence humans also have and test it into IQ tests. Problem is when you absolutize this kind of intelligence as the only thing, and to cut yourself away from what is highest. And then you have this intelligence, we could talk about intelligence of manipulation of ideas, of being able to go through ideas, that is in my opinion, closely tied with language talents that Dugan has, and have political intelligence, and corresponding forms of stupidity, of course. Well, we are reaching 35th minute in 3, 2, 1, 0. So that would be, I think, where I'm already overstaying my welcome. Hope you found this informative. To my reader that posed the question, I hope this was appropriate. This was satisfactory answer. This is Branko Malic of Kali Tribune signing out.